Happy Bitcoin Monday, freaks. It's your host, Odell, here for another Citadel Dispatch, the interactive live show focused on actionable Bitcoin and freedom tech discussion. You may have noticed that I skipped the mainstream media clip this week. My wife and I recently had our first child, and when I'm doing fatherly duties, I've started listening to podcasts at length again, and they are just destroyed by advertising. It's just, and I got my hands full. I'm like holding the kid, I'm like bathing him, doing all this different shit, and I can't skip the ads. So I'm stuck in the ads. I'm pretty sure Dispatch is one of the most listened to non-advertisement funded shows. So a way for me to flex on all the other podcasts is to just do pure content. Just you listen and you just all you do is you get good actionable conversation. So I'm trying this out as a flex. Let me know what you think. If you want the clips to come back, you like them as a time capsule. I always like them as a time capsule too. That's why they exist in the first place. I'll bring the clips back. You can let me know by using podcasting 2.0 apps like Fountain Podcasts in your favorite app store. Just leave a comment there, throw some sats our way, and we can take it from there. But I was just thinking, let's just keep it as clean as possible. But anyway, we have a great conversation lined up. I have these great two tax professionals that are based here at Bitcoin Park in Nashville. They run a business called Satoshi Pacioli, which is probably the best Bitcoin-focused tax firm in the world. A lot of your favorite companies use it. A lot of Bitcoiners are using them on an individual basis. And so we have Joe here and Seth here. How's it going, guys?
Good. Thanks for having us.
Thank you for having us on.
So this is one of my least favorite topics, but you guys said that it was important for us to discuss this before the end of the year. Seth actually told me the day before Christmas, he was like, Matt, this is an important topic. It'd be great if we could rip before the end of the year. He gave me about 7 days to make this rip happen. So here we are live from Bitcoin Park to make it happen. So where should we get started?
Yeah, I mean, I think probably the most pressing thing that we've been getting a lot of questions from people is there's a lot of information around this new safe harbor provision around the new IRS guidelines starting on January 1st. And so I think we're going to try to hopefully like ease people's fears a little bit on it, provide some good information on what you do and don't need to do before the end of the year. And then obviously, like, as you have questions in the chat, feel free to drop those for areas that you want to make sure that we cover.
Yeah.
Do you want to drive into the safe harbor in general, what it is, and kind of how individuals who are holding Bitcoin want to think about it?
Yeah. So basically what the safe harbor is it's the IRS allowing or giving the taxpayers a little bit of flexibility to clean up prior year cost basis that hasn't been like you haven't sold Bitcoin yet and associated that cost basis with the sale. So you have these unused cost basis. Maybe it's HIFO, maybe it's LIFO, maybe it's FIFO, maybe you don't even know what your basis is and you still need to find it.
Wait. What's FIFO? What's LIFO? And what's HIFO?
So FIFO is first in, first out. LIFO is last in, first out. And then HIFO, it's kind of a newer term, I would say. I see it a lot more with the Bitcoin side of things, but it's the highest in, first out. So maybe you bought one Bitcoin at $1,000 and then you bought another at $100K. You might want to sell the $100K first to pay less taxes than the $1,000K. So we can still do that with these prior purchases before January 1st coming up here. But really the main change going forward is a lot more reporting requirements from the IRS starting January 1st. And any Bitcoin that you purchase starting January 1st on will be tracked using FIFO. It's first in, first out.
Yeah. So that's probably the first major change to try to highlight for people starting on January 1st. Previously, you had this optionality of using, hey, I bought Bitcoin at different prices. I'm going to say I sold X Bitcoin and have a smaller gain versus Bitcoin I bought in 2014, for example.
And you could just dynamically switch.
Right. And so now in 2025, they're saying, the IRS is saying essentially, this was always the rule that we wanted people to use, but we weren't like
Clear about it.
clear about it. And so starting in 2025, everyone's going to use this going forward at least. But with the safe harbor provision, assuming that you document it, you're able to take previous Bitcoin that you've acquired prior to 12/31 and use these other options as well still.
Yeah. And I've seen a lot of people kind of freaking out, and I've actually seen a lot of misinformation regarding this stuff online. So, contrary to popular belief, you are not actually formally filing with the IRS right now. You're basically declaring, hey, I'm going to pick specific ID or I'm going to pick global allocation method, and that's that. We're not sending screenshots. We're not sending the IRS your entire cost history that you've ever bought.
I'm not sending the IRS anything right now.
No,
Correct.
you're not sending them anything right now. Where this will come in hand later on would be like 2 or 3 years down the line. Let's say you get audited. The safe harbor provision, the IRS is basically saying, if you allocate your basis how you want to, and then you use that for these sales, by declaring that in the next few days, or we have a little bit of time for one method, you don't run risk of recalculation during audit. So in theory, this document should really only come up during an audit. And that'll be a long way down the road.
So we wouldn't say like, hey, don't worry about it. Like, you don't need to do anything, but it is important to understand that like the reality is for 99% of people, no one will ever see this document besides yourself, just from an understanding from a privacy perspective. I would say.
Okay, so you're saying that you think the percent of Bitcoiners that will be audited in the future is less than 0.1% of Bitcoiners?
I'd be more comfortable if we said less than 1% of Bitcoiners, but it's going to be a small number. There's going to be more and more Bitcoiners, so that number's going to have to come down.
Okay, fair enough.
And I think just from the flip side of that though is the information or whatever you're documenting with the safe harbor plan, as far as whether it's individual addresses, screenshots, whatever it is, be aware that that's what they would be requesting in the audit.
You need to be able to back up what you're doing.
Exactly. So just having that as an understanding of like, this is how the document's going to end up being used for that relatively small percentage of people that it affects.
And that's not different. Like, just because this is Bitcoin, it doesn't make it any different. Like, tax returns are sent to the IRS, and they're assuming you're telling the truth.
Right.
And only then in an audit would it come back up. So,
like during an audit, you're guilty till proven innocent. You basically have to back up everything that you've said to them in the past with actual evidence.
So the IRS might say like, hey, these are a lot of meals or business expenses here. Let's dive into that. But even then, you might run the scenario where you can just do a sample size. Like, you might not actually have every single line item. But yeah, anything that you are ultimately sending to the IRS, you want to be sure that it is correct, because they'll dice you up.
Okay, so freaks. Obviously, we have the Ride or Die freaks in the Nostr chat. We're also paying attention to the YouTube chat. I can see the YouTube chat here, but the Ride or Dies in the Nostr chat. You can get to that chat by going to zap.stream/Odell or citadeldispatch.com/stream. All the important links are at citadeldispatch.com. So if you guys have questions as we're having this conversation, feel free to put the questions in. No question is too dumb. I know this is not people's favorite topic. It's probably like pretty close to the bottom in terms of my favorite topics.
My favorite topic.
That's why we hire people like you guys. Okay, so can we go through like a practical scenario? Let's go through a practical scenario. Probably the scenario that applies to 99% of the people that listen to Citadel Dispatch. So they have let's say they have a custodial wallet on Strike, so they have some Bitcoin on Strike. Not your keys, not your coins. I don't know why you have Bitcoin there, but let's just say you have Bitcoin on Strike. They have some Bitcoin on Strike. They have some Bitcoin in cold storage. So like on their hardware wallet or hardware wallets with multi-sig and Sparrow. So they have a cold storage wallet. And then let's say they have a hot wallet on their phone, right? So they have 3 wallets. How do they, what is the best way for them to proceed here based on your interpretation of this rule?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's been some different guidance around it. I mean, we might even have different opinions on this. It very much is a nuanced tax, but also just practical conversation of like, if you want to make it simplest for your tax side of things, you could just say, move all this into one wallet, whether that's
Yeah, no, don't do that.
okay. That would be the simplest on the tax side, but
I think there's like a rightfully skeptical conspiracy theory that the goal is to scare people into consolidating because that's horrible for your privacy.
right.
So
And
can we just toss out that? Can we
Fair.
toss out that one?
And so like honestly, like 3 wallets is not that complex, right?
Right.
And so it's
Well, I
just
tried to simplify it a little bit for you.
And so what's important to know there is essentially that those 3 wallets are going to have their own cost basis attached to them, right? And so potentially being strategic about, hey, if I have Bitcoin on Strike, it's probably because I am going to be selling or using it in the short term, right? Or as you said, why is it there?
Yeah.
And so maybe that
You're getting ready to sell for
in
your
the short
mortgage or whatever.
Yeah, and so maybe that is my higher cost basis Bitcoin that I have held there,
Or you just bought it, right?
Yeah.
or or you have it there and you plan on leaving it there, or whatever your situation is there though. Like the exchange Bitcoin is probably the most short term Bitcoin, right?
Right.
Versus my cold storage is probably Bitcoin that I don't intend to sell for 1, 2, 5, 10 years, right?
And maybe you've been stacking it for 1, 2, 5, 10 years.
And so that is probably Bitcoin that you have that is your lower cost basis, and that like, yeah, you're going to pay some tax on it eventually, but that is years down the line, right? And then your hot wallet is maybe somewhere in between of like, maybe I'm using that to again purchase things on a regular basis. But like trying to be strategic about which Bitcoin you're holding in each of those wallets at least.
Okay, so then what are you supposed to do?
You would essentially you would document in that kind of that safe harbor of like,
wait. So first of all, let's forget. You don't do anything. Let's just say this sounds like too much for me. It's the 30th of December. Odell decided to have this episode right before the new year. By the way, they gave us like very little warning. Not only did they give us very little warning, the IRS gave them very little warning. So you can blame them for that. We're just making it happen for you freaks. I just want to ignore it. I heard someone before we started ripping, some random person at Bitcoin Park say, I'm just going to outhold the IRS. Like, you're just going to outhold the IRS. I don't want to deal with it. What happens to that person if they want to sell next year?
Yeah, so
they do nothing.
Fundamentally, the only downside to that is it's going to be it would default to their first in, first out.
So it defaults to FIFO. So you're just paying, at that point, you're just paying the lowest cost Bitcoin. Well, no, not necessarily the lowest cost Bitcoin. Right. The oldest Bitcoin you own is the cost that you're selling at.
Exactly.
It might not be your lowest cost.
It might not be. Yeah, if you bought in,
you might have bought at $70,000 at the top of last cycle, and then bought at $15,000. If your first set, you start from the oldest.
Exactly. So
that's not the worst scenario in the world.
No, absolutely not. It's just you're gonna potentially pay a little bit more taxes, but it's not the end of the world. And the other thing is like just as far as what you need to do and like the urgency on it. I can't speak for the IRS obviously, but like if you do this in January 15th of 2025 and you're audited in 2028, 2029, and you have a document and you're like, hey, I did this in January. I would expect that they're going to be like, all right, well, you documented, that's fine. They could come back and say, no,
you were 15 days later.
15 days late. I don't think that would be the case. I think it'll be like, you made a good faith effort.
I mean, they could also just change everything in a year, right?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, that's probably an important thing to highlight as well. Like, this is all very new. it's all subject to change, I would say. And so we could easily come to the end of next year and we're having a completely different conversation on what the rules are.
Okay. So we do nothing and we just pay FIFO. You're basically giving the taxman the max amount of dollars,
Assuming
right?
your lowest cost basis, yeah.
Assuming your first purchase is the lowest cost basis.
Yeah, I mean, unless you like started buying like a week ago, you're like basically giving the taxman, unless you started buying at $108,000.
Yeah.
You're probably giving him the most he could possibly get, and he probably won't be angry at you as a result. And that's not the end of the world. I wouldn't. That it's not like there's freaks. There's a reason we didn't title this episode "Tax Emergency." I figured you'd freak out enough by just seeing the words tax and IRS in your civil dispatch feed. I didn't have to put emergency there as well. I didn't want to like scare you guys. And I think this is a perfect example where if you do nothing, you're really not in this most horrible situation, but you can optimize, right? And one of the jobs of an accountant is to try and optimize your tax burden and legally reduce the amount of taxes you pay. Okay. So now we're actually going to go through the trouble because it's a day before, but we want to make sure everything's going through. Am I correct that you're basically, so I have 3 wallets, right? You have the cold storage, you have the hot wallet, you have the custodial. You're basically saying at this point that I'm going to use one of those 3, FIFO, like first in, first out, last in, first out, highest in, first out for each wallet you're dictating. And it's not on a per transaction basis, it's on a wallet basis. And they can each be different,
yes,
right? Can I say I'm doing HIFO for cold storage, LIFO for hot wallet, and FIFO for...
In theory, yes, as long as it's Bitcoin that's purchased before January 1st, 2025.
So then after January 1st, 2025, everything's FIFO?
Everything is FIFO.
Yeah.
Okay.
All assuming that you purchase Bitcoin after that point.
Yeah.
Because the trouble with this is now we're looking in the past. So like all of this data should
But
change.
everything is FIFO on a per tax lot basis, right? So like if you have a different wallet... Okay, so now let's go to... I feel like I'm jumping all over the place, but I'm just asking the questions as I come up with them. So if it's January 31st, February 15th, it's the day after Valentine's Day, and I buy some new Bitcoin, and I put that in a separate wallet for my cold storage. And so my cold storage obviously has older cost bases, right? But this new one is at $95,000 or whatever price we're at. Mm-hmm. And I sell that one. I can use the most like is it on like, do you understand what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Is it like, is my cost basis $95,000 or is it first in, first out across all of my Bitcoin?
It will be by wallets. Yeah.
So it's on a per wallet basis.
Yeah.
So could you technically like spin up a new wallet for every receipt and then you'd be...
in theory you could. Essentially you're going to end up in the same place though.
Yeah.
And that...
But then couldn't you select which wallet to sell? You can always select which wallet to sell from, right? I'm not like trying to cheat the system. I'm trying to understand. Yeah. I'm trying to understand how this works. Like, are they going to allow that?
Well, so that would be assuming that you sold that Bitcoin that you purchased on February 15th.
Right.
And
no, so then comes August 31st or whatever, and instead of selling from my cold storage, I sell from that wallet. Mm-hmm. My cost base is $95,000 or whatever that price was.
Yeah, and like because you bought it like in River, for example, so River's going to have that cost basis.
Well, then I send it out to River to the self-custody. Once you go to self-custody, does it mix everything?
Yeah, so that's probably an important thing to highlight. And we're talking about 2 different years here. 2025 is going to be different than 2026. But let's say you buy on River in 2025, you're going to have a cost basis assigned to it. They're going to know what it is. You pull it off of River, hold it into self-custody, and then send it back. They're not going to know which Bitcoin you sent back to them, right? They're not going to know it was that Bitcoin that you purchased. So you're going to have to give that to them again. And so it'll be up to you to report, hey, this is the Bitcoin that I bought on this date, and I'm sending it back to you, and here's the cost basis. I caveat that with 2025 or 2026 because in 2025 there's no reporting requirement by the exchange to report the cost basis to the IRS, and so the River may or may not ask you for it, but they're not going to tell the IRS, hey, this was $95,000 Bitcoin that Odell purchased from us and sold for $96,000. But in 2026, they're
And
going
this is another piece.
Yes.
Yeah.
This is separate
There's
from
multiple years.
this
Yeah.
safe harbor stuff, right?
Correct.
This is a different
Yeah.
ruling that
So like
came out.
thinking so the safe harbor is for all Bitcoin purchased ever before New Year's year.
Right. Okay, so let's finish with this. I
Yeah.
jumped around too much.
You're
Let's
okay.
finish with the safe harbor.
Yeah. So safe harbor.
So how do you actually prepare for that? I'm taking screenshots of my individual wallets, and then I'm time stamping them and saying HIFO or LIFO or FIFO, right?
I think that's probably the simplest way to go about it.
Let me read some of these notes. Another piece too that is a little confusing is the IRS uses the term account and wallet interchangeably. From a Bitcoin perspective, one account and one wallet, I think, is just your extended public address, and so that's one way that I've thought of it.
Your account is your wallet.
Yeah.
Is each wallet. Well, I feel like a lot of this is designed for people that just buy custodial and stay custodial.
Yeah.
And then everything gets more complicated for anyone who actually wants to keep self-custody.
Like if you've never bought Bitcoin before until like Thursday, life's pretty easy.
You can just tune out right now.
Yeah, like you don't have to deal with this safe harbor.
I mean, it's also like
wait till this time next year. We're gonna have a new episode for you to panic.
There's also all these rules are written for digital assets in general, so it applies to all the other cryptocurrencies, and so they had to make like these broad rules apply, whereas like Bitcoin doesn't necessarily fit into those bubbles all the time.
Okay. So, but once again, what am I doing? You're taking screenshots, and then you have to timestamp it, right?
It definitely needs to be time stamped. I don't know, like, do you have to do I'm not finished, sorting out my prior cost basis.
Well, I'm not even saying you're taking screenshots of the cost basis. You're just taking screenshots like this wallet had 20 million sats in it.
Yeah.
And here's a screenshot of that wallet with, I guess, addresses shown in the screenshot. Something to prove what the account is, right?
Exactly. Like you need to be able to have something that shows here's the Bitcoin sitting in this account, and something that you can go back to for audit purposes. So screenshots is probably the easiest way to do that. You could
sign
do
a
an
message,
right? As well.
But that's like complicated.
Yeah.
They probably won't even know what that is.
Yeah. You could do an export out of a lot of wallets, right?
What do you mean? Like get an Excel?
Yeah, like a CSV export.
If you're a custodial, you could definitely do that.
Yeah. Or even like, I want to say Sparrow has like a good export.
Okay.
Not all of them will, but certainly like anything like.
But then are you taking a screenshot of the export, or you're just keeping the CSV file, the Excel file?
It should probably be a screenshot, just so you have like a timestamp on it.
So then, when they say timestamps, everyone wants us to like upload them to open timestamps. I'm a little bit so technically the way open timestamps works is it's just taking a hash of the file and then it's anchoring the hash in the Bitcoin blockchain, so you can prove that this file was timestamped at this time and wasn't changed. It's not actually uploading the file to the blockchain or to open timestamp servers. Now, the average person can't verify that that's actually happening. You don't know if like Peter Todd is actually like keeping all the files, or like some like malicious man in the middle is in there and doing it or not. And then other people have suggested emailing it to yourself, but then like Gmail, like the NSA, like the Australians, like everyone gets a copy of all of your wallets. So I really hate the email idea.
Yeah.
Because email's just like wide the fuck open. What about can someone? I'm just thinking like, couldn't someone just like print out a screenshot and then take it to their local notary and just have it like good old fashioned notarized?
Yeah, no, I mean, yeah, that certainly would work. It's obviously more
go to the UPS store and just have them fucking stamp the thing.
Yeah, I mean, you certainly could do it that way. You're probably not going to want to do that by like, if you want to do that tomorrow, right? That'll be
you have a day.
You have a day.
New Year's Eve, UPS stores are open.
Yeah,
on New Year's
I mean,
it's a great way to spend your New Year's Eve.
I don't know that will be the thing that like the IRS harps on 2 or 3 years from now,
The timestamp.
or whether you timestamped it or not, or whether they believe it. I mean, the other thing is like you can go back and look at that wallet address on chain and be like, hey, like what balance was sitting in there on that date, right? And so you'll have blockchain support for that balance if you need to go back to and
You can show it hasn't been moved.
yeah,
Yeah.
or that it was moved and when it was moved, right?
You just show the mempool.space or whatever.
Yeah. So I'm not overly worried about the timestamping and the documentation of when you did it.
But don't you have to timestamp yourself saying I'm doing HIFO? Isn't that what you're timestamping more than the wallet?
Yeah, you are picking like this is the two main options are specific unit allocation and global allocation. And so we've been advising clients that specific ID is probably going to give you the most flexibility into the future.
Wait, specific ID versus what?
Global. So global, the taxpayer basically is picking a general justification, for example, like price per unit. So I bought 2 coins, price was 50K a coin. I'm going to go off of that that purchase price, and then maybe you split that into 2 different wallets, and it's 1 Bitcoin for 50K and 1 Bitcoin for 50K. The specific ID, you're actually documenting like, hey, I've got 1 UTXO with 1 Bitcoin in it, and I purchased at 10K, 15.
Different cost base for each UTXO?
Yeah, and so like maybe you have 3 coins, and one of them,
nice.
You bought at $1,000 and you want to keep it. I want that coin to stay at $1,000.
Right.
And maybe you sell that one last if you ever do sell. Specific ID is going to allow you to do that. So you can hand pick each purchase that you made. Each individual purchase, unfortunately, even if it was like a 50-cent dollar cost average, that is one unique basis. And so if you're someone like me who did dollar cost average a little too much,
hourly 50 cent,
I got a nightmare to deal with. I mean, every single one of those lines, each individual purchase is its own unique cost basis.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
Wait, so this is specific ID versus global?
Yeah.
So the safe harbor is you're picking specific ID or you're picking global. You're telling the IRS.
So wallet basis or UTXO basis, basically.
Yeah, I think that's a good way to summarize it.
And the one thing to note, so the global allocation, that if you're going to pick that method, technically it does need to be done before year end. Specific ID, it needs to be done before your first disposition in 2025, or if you go
the first transaction.
Yeah, or you go the whole year, you don't sell anything. When you file your 2025 tax return in April of 2026, that's the last possible date that you need to make the election by.
If you're due no transactions. That's what you're saying.
Yeah, like if you hold out and you don't sell anything during 2025, you'll still need to dictate, all right, I'm doing specific
ID. Legit my least favorite topic. Only for you guys. And for you freaks. It's for the freaks. Okay.
And this is all old Bitcoin. And how are we going to account for old Bitcoin? Now, I mean, do we feel comfortable with safe harbor under our belt now?
Right. You can just ignore all of this and just do FIFO going forward. You'd be fine too.
Yeah. I think the situation we might run into more would be somebody bought Bitcoin a long time ago and they don't know the cost basis. Maybe the exchange doesn't exist.
But then your cost basis is 0, right? You just pay the tax man the full amount. You say, don't throw me in jail.
Yeah. I mean,
and you take a 0 cost basis.
Yeah. Unfortunately, that's kind of the way it works.
We're at 100K. Like the difference between $50 and a 0 cost basis is fucking nothing.
That is the reality. Like the thing I've been advising people of, like, maybe the good thing or the bad thing is like your cost base is going to trend to 0.
Yeah.
Of like you bought it at 1,000 or you bought it at 500, right? It's like
no one gives a shit.
Right.
You might as well just pay them the maximum amount.
Yeah. So number goes up, fixes a lot of things. It will make your tax bill go up though.
I mean, you make more money, your tax bill's higher.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's all.
I hate taxes as much as the other person, but like you pay taxes on profit.
Yeah.
I mean, capital gain is I beat inflation tax basically. So
yeah, it's inflation savings tax.
Mm-hmm. So yeah, that's all old Bitcoin purchased prior to New Year's coming up.
Okay.
Yeah. So now there's kind of 2 parts. The main thing, there's a new form that these transactions will be documented on. And so most likely your exchange probably used a 1099B, K, or the miscellaneous form. because the exchanges didn't really have good guidance. Like, where do we put this stuff, right? So the IRS has finally come up with the form. It's 1099 digital assets. And it has, much more data than the 1099-B relative to these things. It's got the cost basis, the proceeds. You can even pick if it's ordinary income, long-term, short-term game. The kicker is, so if you purchase Bitcoin on January 2nd coming up here, and then you sell it, when we're at 500K at Christmas, there's going to be a huge gain there. But like if you bought it on River, for example, River's going to know that you bought that Bitcoin. So they'll know the cost basis. But for 2025 tax year, showing up on the form spring of 2026, that cost basis is not being submitted to the IRS. It might show up on there. You can kind of think of it as a suggestion, like River saying, hey, we saw you bought this Bitcoin here. I think these match up. Here's a suggested cost basis to use.
And it's probably going to be the right cost basis because in 2025, everyone should be using FIFO and they should be treating it by wallet.
Yeah.
And so that's probably going to be
And you haven't moved it off of River.
Yeah.
Right. You're just doing the full custodial happy suit strategy.
Yes.
And then the final iteration is January 1st, 2026 and onwards. That cost basis is going to be given to the IRS. So like now.
So then Strike or River they're just sending it direct after 2026. They're sending what they think the cost basis is to the IRS.
Yeah, or what they know because maybe you moved Bitcoin in.
Well, no, they know it if you buy on the exchange and you never take it off the exchange.
Yeah.
And then you sell it on the same exchange, then they know the cost basis.
Yes.
Yes.
That's the easiest.
But if you're a good Bitcoiner and you withdraw, and then you redeposit, are they just going to be reporting miscellaneous cost basis left and right? Like what?
They're going to have to get that from you. And so I expect they'll start doing this in 2025. But like in 2026, so absolutely, like if you deposit into an exchange,
it's going to pop up like you deposit. It's going to be like, what's your cost basis?
I think so.
You kind of like River started offering that already, but it's optional right now.
Yeah, because they track your cost basis really well on there, which is nice.
But they do that as like a favor right now. And soon it's going to be like when you go to deposit, it's going to be like enter your cost basis.
Yeah, I think so. And it will probably be like, we can't accept your Bitcoin, or
you'll have a zero, or they'll zero you. They'll put a zero cost basis.
I mean, they could do that. Yeah, if it's
kind of malicious.
I mean, that would be bad if you miss that step and you bought it for 100,000. They put zero in there on you. That would be great. But I think it will be a common practice. And I would expect that they're going to try like at least phase it in 2025
because stocks don't have this issue. No one deposits and withdraws stocks.
Exactly.
So like on stocks, like Charles Schwab like knows your cost basis for everything.
Exactly. And you might have bought it on two different exchanges, but like you're not going to move your stock from one exchange to another.
Yeah, and right.
And so it's very much a unique issue with Bitcoin specifically. Like you can hold it yourself, you can move it around. You could say this is the IRS trying to prevent you or make it harder for you to do that. I think it's more likely it's just trying to wrap their hands around it, like not really understanding what they're trying to implement. But I think if it, we have some time before this actually rolls out for 2026, where they have to collect the cost basis, have to report on the cost basis. I would expect some pushback from exchanges between now and then of like, it's a more of an administrative burden hurdle for them.
Right. Yeah, could this change?
Yeah, absolutely.
So how do these IRS rules get decided? Like, is there like an elected group of people that make these decisions? Or?
No, it's a bureaucracy. So it's unelected bureaucrats that they would say are.
Can Elon fire them? Like, is that within his? Can the executive?
I actually don't know how the head of the IRS is appointed. I don't think he's a presidential.
Yeah, I don't actually know that.
But I mean, essentially, the IRS would say they are interpreting the rules from Congress that Congress has laid out.
So Congress can pass something that changes.
Absolutely. So that would be the easiest way to kind of get this overturned. Of like Congress is like, no, this is incorrect. We don't want the IRS to do that. The IRS certainly can't like be like, no, we're going to ignore Congress.
Yeah.
IRS right now is saying like, this is our guidance based on the current tax rules in place. We're not creating new tax rules.
So it could change.
Yeah, and honestly, I expect it to. I wouldn't bake your whole.
You shouldn't bet on it changing.
Yeah,
you should assume that it won't change.
Yeah, and then be happy if it does.
Yeah.
But I think you'll get pushback from exchanges in 2025 as they start to dive into this. Like, it's going to be a hurdle for them to obviously collect it. People are going to send them the wrong information. It's going to be a bad experience for the customers, especially if you're someone who Coinbase, who just wants to like have a bunch of activity and trading and everything, right? Like, I expect that they would have a big lobbying push to get this reduced. Who knows? Maybe they have a big enough team there where they don't care about it. Yeah. But I would expect that there'll be pushback in the next year, and ideally we come around at the end of the next year and we're having a different conversation. But this is what we want to kind of plan for.
Yeah. Okay. So, okay, that all I mean, the conspiracy side of me is like, this is a way to just like push people to stay custodial only, or even better, like buy the ETF. Like, you buy the ETF, you can completely ignore this episode, right? Because Charles Schwab just knows your cost base, submits it, whatever.
Yeah, I mean, I guess it's a little bit more complicated, but the flip side is like, it doesn't have to be that much. Well, it's going to be a little bit more complicated, but like the new rules in 2025, 26, when you're using FIFO, like that's not any different than if you were to buy the ETF or keep it custodially. Like, you can still move money around and into different wallets. It's just going to be on you to track that, so that if you do convert back to fiat, you have that cost basis. The other thing is just like, convert to fiat as little as possible, right? Like,
if you don't sell, you don't have to worry about any of that.
Yeah. Well, we would say that, but also the same rules apply for spending Bitcoin, which is gets a little bit more complicated.
Yeah.
Wait, so yeah, I mean, I guess if you're just FIFOing everything, like, it's really not that complicated, right? Like, you're just keeping a list of your purchases, and then as you sell, you're just like crossing out from the list as you go up, and you just pay them FIFO.
And that's always been the simplest. It's not the most tax advantage, but like,
what concerns me is that there's going to be exchanges, and I know for a fact Strike won't do this, because I'm going to personally make sure that they handle it in the most elegant, user-forward way possible. But there's going to be a lot of exchanges that are just misreporting cost bases and just making you look like a fraud when you're not a fraud.
Yeah, and that,
right? Like, there's going to be a bunch of they're going to just basically get a bunch of cross-contamination where it's like a person is actually honestly trying to pay their full tax burden.
Yeah.
Discloses to the IRS a certain amount, pays a certain amount, and then the exchange is just sending them a completely different cost basis.
Yeah, and I worry about that as well. Like, right now, the reality is people already get freaked out when they see the 1099B and it's got a cost basis on there, and like, this doesn't seem right to me. And like, we can easily say to them like, all right, that's fine. You don't need to worry about that. The IRS is not getting that information. They're not going to say you reported a different amount and it's contradictory. Like, you just need to have your support for why you're using the cost basis you are. But yeah, in 2026, they are going to have a number there. And if that number is wrong, and you're trying to correct it, like, you're either going to have to get a updated number, updated form 1099 DA from the exchange, or have that fight with the IRS, which no one wants to do.
I think this is the least zapped episode in history, by the way. Shout out to Ride or Die Freak Mav21 with 4,200 sats, the highest zap so far.
Everyone just focused on saving their sats for their IRS bill now.
When I was laughing earlier is because Jevy in the live chat said Odell legit glazing over, quote unquote, no way I'm doing any of this. To be clear here, to everybody listening, like, I probably will just FIFO everything. I'll give them their max taxes. Please, sir, with the gun, don't bother me and my family. Here's your VIG. Like, I hate taxes as much as the next person, but screenshots and stuff. Like that scares the shit out of me. Like I don't want like online records of my.
Yeah.
It sounds like a privacy nightmare. It sounds like a lot of people are gonna destroy their privacy over this.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. No, and I think that's probably a good point.
when they could just pay, 10% more to not just like if that's really the equation, right? It's like, are you going to take a privacy risk to save 10 to 30% or something, right? I don't know what the number is. No one knows. The number is on a case by case basis.
And I think it probably depends on how good your privacy is today, honestly.
Right.
Like you said, like if you're the guy who's got all their funds at the exchange, like you don't have any privacy, right?
Yeah, if your funds are already on an exchange, then you're,
but-
and this is easy.
But
too.
you've already done a whole bunch of stuff to really keep your Bitcoin private. You've done, coin joins, all that stuff. Like this would be a huge step backwards for you for potentially a tax savings, but like even that is short term. And that like if you're paying FIFO and you got a low cost basis, you may be paying a higher tax this year, but it's a lower tax bill next year, for example, right?
Right.
And so it's not the end of the world, and it's not, if privacy is important for you, it's going to come at a cost, right?
Right.
And so that's always part of the equation.
Okay. The chats are not really giving me any questions. Do you guys really have no questions? Did we make this complicated topic so simple that you guys have no questions? The zaps are now coming in. Thank you, sir. I don't know who this
You have to
is.
shame them, apparently.
Yeah.
I don't know. It's just a miscellaneous NPub. I gotta press refresh. Dechaos1517 sent 4,200 sats. Thank you. His comment is, this zap identifies as a non-taxable event. Someone in the live chat asked, what if he had BlockFi? I don't really know what he means by that. But you have no money now.
Yeah, that's tough.
Yeah, I mean, most likely a bankruptcy loss event.
There's like a 90% chance that's a troll comment.
But yeah, I mean, there'd be a loss on there. You tax deductible.
Do they get their money? Aren't they getting their money back through FTX or whatever?
Oh, it was like 50% or something.
Are they getting like what was it about? Like the US dollar value at the time FTX collapsed?
I thought that was FTX.
Yeah, but FTX owns BlockFi. To save customers, BlockFi Zach, while he went on paternity leave as his company was going under, and then sold it to FTX, and then FTX turned out to be a Ponzi scheme, and then everyone got double fucked.
That was a crazy time.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, FTX came to the rescue.
I didn't know that FTX bought BlockFi.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's pretty hilarious, actually. I mean, it sucks. It sucks for the people that lost money, but I also was very loud telling people not to use BlockFi or FTX, so I can sleep well at night. Do you guys? So then there's another IRS thing, which is this broker rule. Yeah. Do you guys have an opinion on this? Have you looked at it at all, or
a little bit?
Slightly.
Yeah, I mean, I think broadly we were discussing it earlier. A little bit outside my wheelhouse, but essentially, like for exchanges, like it's easy, like they have to do reporting, but like the guidance on some of this stuff is requesting reporting on data that they don't have. Like we were talking about like RoboSats, for example, right? Like in theory, like they fall under this guidance where they're not collecting information from users.
And they're non-custodial.
They're non-custodial, not holding any funds, just based on the IRS like guidance there. It's like, oh, they're in violation, but they have no ability to actually collect that data by design, right? And so unless they're going to come and say it's illegal to do this, which is a whole separate...
Aren't they effectively saying that?
They're effectively saying that, but that's not what the actual rule says. The rule says, like, hey, you can do whatever you want, just report it, right? And so it gets into, again, like, the IRS cannot make laws or cannot make rules. And so that's where I think they're going to get a lot of pushback and legal arguments from, hey, the IRS is overstepping their bounds as far as creating new rules versus enforcing the rules laid out there by Congress. So we could I don't know that's worth spending a ton of time on right now, and that there's going to be a lot of changes in the next couple of years before it, in theory, goes into effect.
There's already a couple suits. Like,
Yeah.
we probably don't have to worry about it too much right now. But I mean, what we talked about earlier, our interpretation is probably good luck enforcing some of this stuff. Like, how do you get RoboSats to
Yeah.
KYC?
Yeah, I mean, the other
I
thing,
mean,
though,
you're de facto criminalizing the operators, right? Isn't that the strategy?
it seems like, and unfortunately, like, we saw some of this on the Lightning side with wallets, right, where they just said, like, we're just gonna, like, get out of the U.S. and we're
Right,
not
no
gonna, like,
U.S. users.
and so, like, yeah, if nothing changes there, I could see that being a route for a lot of these of just like, we're not going to even be in a gray area here. We're just going to like not be associated with the U.S., which would be obviously bad for U.S. consumers.
I mean, maybe the incoming administration, there's some changes there. I think the rhetoric from Trump and his team is that they don't want innovation to go offshore. So I would there's going to be
Trump and Elon are just going to save us, right? You can just ignore the whole episode and just Trump and Elon will save us. Do you guys have an opinion on the corporate transparency stuff? Do you pay attention to that? Did you see that there was an injunction and then they overturned it again?
Yeah.
You have to, the beneficial owners of LLCs need to be doxed
So-
to FinCEN, I think?
Yeah, it's with FinCEN. So right now it's off, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
What do you mean? It's back on.
No.
No,
It's
back
off
on.
again.
As of when?
Stopped.
It was, I think, December 23rd, it was back on. 3
As of
days.
today, it's back on. No?
Is there a new update today?
They said they were probably going to go back on while we're...
Unless it's only just happened like in the last few hours.
Oh, I got a text this morning that it was back on.
I might need to update my
Yeah, we
information.
might need to...
As of
We
the
stopped emailing
26th,
clients because we're just back and forth.
as of the 26th, it was off.
And today's the 30th.
Yeah, so I might be out of date at this point.
Yeah, I think it's back on.
It's-
So you guys weren't aware that it's
No.
back on?
No, that's
My
fine.
understanding is the Fifth Circuit Court brought it back.
Yeah, they were always the like
I don't know. I'm
they
not,
made the
I'm
injunction.
not a lawyer, not an accountant. I'm not a judge. I don't know.
Yeah, let me check. Let's check
do a
their
quick search here.
website. Because they updated on their website.
Well, I'm glad I asked. Jim Kreider asked, if I elect HIFO, can I later make a specific election for a particular lot? For instance, want to gift Bitcoin to a charity and want to gift the lowest cost basis. I assume no.
What was the... If he starts with...
He elects HIFO and then he later wants to not use HIFO, I guess.
The way I interpreted that was no. So the election that you're making, whether to do specific ID or global, is irrevocable. So, but see, in that scenario, he could just set aside some Bitcoin. Maybe he will do that, give it to charity down the line, and he can go ahead and assign the cost basis that he wants, presumably the lowest one for that amount.
Even if he chose HIFO?
No, because that the choice does need to be made now.
And you have to be consistent, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
This change is irrevocable. So.
Just on the DOI stuff, the last update on their website is from December 27th, saying it's a voluntary submissions only. Maybe their website's just not updated.
Okay. So it's back off.
The TBD.
I'm saying it's back off right now.
Yeah.
Back off.
But yeah, I would check that. Whenever you're listening to this, it probably will.
Okay.
Before that, they had moved the deadline back to January 13th, anyways. So between now and January 13th, I would just keep an eye on it and not do anything before that deadline. It's honestly the best guidance we could give right now.
Okay. Now I have another question. Why wouldn't you just select? When would it be a bad selection to just do HIFO everything? All your existing wallets. Is there any bad situation to have HIFO? How is that? I didn't even know HIFO was a thing.
Yeah. Honestly, no. The rare exceptions there is if you have a year where you don't have a ton of income come in, and you can get your capital gains that you're paying is at a 0% capital gains rate. Then you could use a lower cost basis and it doesn't hurt you.
But is HIFO legit? Is that actually like a thing? Like
Yeah.
people do it and don't get audited?
Absolutely. Yeah.
I mean, isn't it basically specific ID? You're picking.
It's the same line of
Highest.
thinking, but yeah. No, I mean, people have used it. It seems like
Do people use that for stocks and shit too?
I'm not 100% certain.
no. So the difference is Bitcoin is not a security, right?
Yeah.
Sarah likes to make that point. The IRS treats it as property. And so because they treat it as property, you can choose different Bitcoin that you're purchasing at different times. And so you have more flexibility there with that classification as property than you would with like a security, for example.
Yeah.
So,
And one thing to note, wash sale rules do not currently apply to cryptocurrencies. So
you explain what a wash sale rule is.
yeah, so in traditional finance, you buy the S&P 500 ETF at the top, and then after Powell makes his comments, it drops. So then you sell it at a loss, right? If with Bitcoin in mind, you're probably trying to lower that cost basis, right? So you won't be able to do that with security because there's basically a 30.
Or don't you have to wait? You wait 30 days.
30 days.
So it does not apply for Bitcoin currently.
I thought they got rid of it. Doesn't it apply now or no?
No. I have heard in Canada you can't do that, but as of right now, you can wash sale your Bitcoin. So
you can just immediately buy it back.
Yeah.
So you bought it at the top in 2021.
Oh, I thought they got rid of that last year or something.
No, they've been talking about it forever. And
as of right now, it's still live.
You mentioned there's a box on the form where
the
like
new
it seems like they're
1099
getting ready for it.
It has a box that says wash sale disallowed. So,
but that's not the rule yet. So
no, and like,
wait, so why do they have the box? What's the box?
Because they're going to change the rule one day.
Yeah.
So there's a couple of.
So you're supposed to check off the box after it's not allowed, or
no? So like that won't be anything on our side. That's just saying, hey, in the future we're probably going to change the rules, and wash sales will apply to Bitcoin.
Okay,
but again, that will have to be.
Yeah, no, if you used FIFO or LIFO in the past, hypothetically, and then you wanted to switch to HIFO for the safe harbor, you can just switch.
Yeah, there's no problem with that.
So really, the best advice is everyone should just choose HIFO.
Yeah, assuming that you have like your cost basis in order, you can go back and get the information that you need.
Like document your wallets offline.
Yeah.
Write down I choose HIFO.
Yeah.
And then somehow timestamp that.
Yes, I mean,
I guess you can mail it to yourself like snail mail, right?
You could.
Yeah. You know, keep it in the envelope, right?
The other thing that you see a lot of, it'd be interesting to get your perspective on it. Like a lot of people will use tax software, coin tracker, stuff like that, which is good from like a quick and easy calculation. But you're obviously giving all your information to one third party. Obviously, it's just a trade off like anything else. But like, I would say there's significant downside to use that as well. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, obviously, it's like fucking horrible for your privacy.
Yeah, I mean,
there's trade-offs everywhere. The most convenient stuff will probably be.
I mean, like if you care most about your privacy, like you should probably use like a composition notebook to track it.
Yeah.
And then the step above that is you just do like a local Excel file.
Yeah.
Which is like that one you're not going crazy. It can actually do math for you. You don't have to do the math yourself in a composition notebook.
And one of the nice things about that is like, because we've had people that use some of the coin tracking software, obviously they're giving up their privacy, but then they also like it's a black box where they don't know like if the calculation is correct. So they're just like, hey,
it like spits out a number.
Yeah. A lot of times it'll like miscalculate an internal transfer as a taxable event, and you still have to go in and manually adjust that. So
if you're doing it in your own Excel file, like you have to understand how it's working and get to the number yourself, which is why we generally do that with our clients to be like, here's the number and here's how we got to this number. And then you can also obviously build on it as you're buying more and everything like that. So Excel, unfortunately, is a good option for a lot of things. So for better or worse.
Matt, have you heard of Rotkey for tracking your cost basis?
No. What is it?
It's RO.
You have to speak up a little bit.
ROTKI. That's how you spell it.
No, never heard of it.
We had one client mention it on a call. I don't know if it is like 100% open source, but it's definitely different than like CoinTracker. It does have room for like NFTs and staking and all that, but that might be one option that people could look at. It might be a little better than maybe from a privacy
I
perspective.
mean, I think you just use an Excel. You do a local Excel sheet, or like if you're on Mac, Numbers, or if you're on Linux, Open Office, but just like a not Google Docs spreadsheet.
Yeah.
And then you just date, sale, cost basis, price at sale.
Yeah.
And then you just do the Grugbane math. You do the math. Once that's like, it's a combination of the mental burden of doing the math and obviously high cost on savings, which is insane that there's a tax on savings in the first place.
Yeah.
That really grinds my gears. Okay.
What's still confusing you?
It makes sense to me, as not an accountant or a lawyer, that you would just establish HIFO or whatever. But I still can't believe that they're not like auditing people automatically if they're doing HIFO. Like,
yeah. So I think kind of,
and it's like, even if you're being completely honest, like audits just fucking suck.
Well,
like, you don't in an ideal world, you just don't want to be audited in the first place.
So I think two things on that. You're not telling them what you're using when you're giving them your hall spaces. And so
right. So like let's say they know hypothetically that you've been in Bitcoin since 2016.
Yeah.
And you're just using HIFO.
Yeah.
And you're basically like paying them very little in taxes because you've still been stacking.
Right.
Probably getting audited.
I wouldn't know if I would give them that much credit for how much they know.
Yeah, they're not this all-knowing entity. Like they're
okay.
Yeah, I mean, like, first off,
but this is not tax advice.
I mean, the reality is, eventually, if you're living your life on Bitcoin, number goes up, like you're going to be diving into some of those earlier coins, and so it doesn't last forever, right? If you stacked, a whole coin this year and you have a cost basis of $100,000 on it, right? Like that's a lot of money,
right?
Versus if you could have gotten a couple coins at $1,000 each, right? Like, and so like just number wise, like you're gonna eventually get into older and older coins there if you're spending your Bitcoin, to live your life,
right?
But I think there are like red flags for there, so you have to look out for, like, tax loss harvesting is a great way to kind of like, Bitcoin goes down, you sell it, you buy it right back.
Also horrible for your privacy.
Horrible for your privacy, but also a potential flag there where it's like, hey, I know you bought 5 Bitcoin, and then you told me you lost $50,000 on it, but I know the price went up last year, right? And it's like, well, the time that I bought it and sold it, I lost a bunch. That could easily be something where it's like, we don't really know if that seems right to us. We know Bitcoin went up. You said you had a huge loss. Like, that would be something I'd be more worried about raising a flag for the IRS, even if it's right, even if you did everything according to the book, if you're trying to stay away from an audit.
Would you say that you might be more likely to be audited simply with the yes or no question on the front, rather than, because see, the Bitcoin sale proceeds are lumped in the same form with like stocks, so it's not that out of
what the yes or no? Do you own Bitcoin or do you not?
Yeah. So
have you ever bought, sold, traded Bitcoin? So one digital assets, that checkbox.
The nuance there is that it doesn't include bought. So if you just bought Bitcoin,
I think it does include bought.
So there's a couple of
it's up to interpretation, isn't it?
Well, I was just on an IRS CPE the other day and learned another scenario that it's yes, so we can kind of run through these. So the question on this upcoming tax form, so this will be on...
Well, no, what was last year's?
I think it's the same, just minus the date. It looks the same.
Okay, so continue.
At any time during 2024, did you A, receive as a reward, award, or payment for property or services, or B, sell, exchange, or otherwise dispose of a digital asset?
Exchange.
So that is like you swapped Ethereum for Bitcoin, taxable event.
Wait, it's not swap dollars for Bitcoin?
No. So for anyone listening at home, if all you do is buy Bitcoin and hold it, you check no. That's it.
Interesting.
Now,
But then
I think a lot of people checked yes if they just bought only.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, then I mean, you can get into like I don't love this rule, but like you can get into
Yeah.
like transfer and
So
fees.
I learned, I was shocked to hear the IRS say this, but if you, so let's run a scenario you're using Strike, you're going to send some Bitcoin that you just bought in Strike to your cold storage, and you say, I can wait 24 hours, right? And you take that delayed option, no transaction fee. The answer is no. If you send Bitcoin from an internal personal wallet to an internal personal wallet, and it does incur a transaction fee, the answer is yes.
Technically, you disposed of some Bitcoin there of
The transaction fee.
50 cents or whatever it was. So, I mean, that basically puts everyone in the just mark the box anyways. And the
Basically.
thing I'd be worried about there is like you mark yes, and then you don't have anything where you actually report any significant transactions. I guess in that case, you'd be
Yeah.
reporting the 50 cents that you
Right.
incurred for the fee, and then your
Right. It's a
neighbor
red
logged
flag
on
if you're
that.
saying yes, but you're not actually paying them any money.
Exactly. Yeah.
So-
So I worry about that as well.
Pack players that can check no, you didn't own any assets, any digital assets to begin with. You maybe bought Bitcoin last year, you just held it this year, you didn't move it or sell it or do anything. The answer is no. If you purchase and just hold it, the answer is no. And then if you transact it internally and there's no transaction fee, the answer is no. Everything else, the answer is yes. If you received an airdrop, if you received a fork, if you swapped your Ethereum for your Bitcoin, if you're paid for services or goods with Bitcoin, and then like staking mine.
But none of you just bought.
If you just buy and hold, the answer is no.
And apparently, if you just buy it, don't move.
And if you buy and you just sit on it, the answer is no. But that one I really didn't like seeing.
But so in 2026, when they're sending the form, when the exchanges start sending the forms directly to the IRS, are they sending them a form? If you only bought, do they send them a form, or if they only
so
send?
they
them
only send the form to report the proceeds from
Yeah.
sales.
So if you never sold, they're also not sending a form.
No.
Correct.
And that's the same. Like if you don't sell any stocks, you're not going to get a brokerage statement.
Right.
So
Yeah,
So if you just
don't get a
bought on
1099 in
strike,
that situation.
moved it off, there's no reporting there for that.
Okay.
move it off with. Well, yeah. Never mind.
What?
I got confused. There's too much going on here.
Okay, freaks. Does anyone have any more questions? Because I feel like we covered everything.
Yeah.
Oh, Nick B's asking, what is the cost basis on mined Bitcoin?
Essentially, fundamentally, the Bitcoin mined is revenue and taxable at the time it's earned.
The price at that block height.
Exactly. So, you got 3 blocks yesterday, whatever it is, or however your pool is calculating that. We will generally get an export from the pool that says, here's how much Bitcoin you mine on a given day. Either put it on the price at the time that you mine the block or the average over the course of the day and use that for revenue for mining.
You're probably not going to get in trouble if you just use the closing price of Bitcoin for the day.
If you do it
If you can,
consistently.
yeah. The most important thing with anything with the IRS at the end of the day is just good faith and stay consistent.
Yeah, don't play games with them. Just
Right.
Not worth it.
like you're just you do your best to pay your full obligations.
And we'll do our best to help lower that obligation.
Okay, awesome. Guys, this has been great. I mean, it's been kind of great. Before we wrap, I just want to say to all the freaks that continue to support the show, whether that's through Zapstream or Fountain Podcast app or other podcasting 2.0 apps, you guys make me continue and keep trucking through. The show obviously doesn't have advertisements, so your support means a lot. The top boost from Podcasting 2.0 last episode, episode 146 with Fran from Zap Store was 8 Mithrandor with 7,777 sats, saying Zap Store sounds much needed. Nakamoto 6102 with 7,000 sats, saying appreciate you. And Doom Satoshi with 3,333 sats, saying bootstrapping Web of Trust with shitposting and sats. Thank you for your time. Guys, this year, Fountain released their report for the top shows of the year. Citadel Dispatch got number 13. Rabbit Hole Recap got number 1, which is fucking badass. So all you freaks that support that show, thank you. Thank you a lot. It means the world. But Dispatch getting 13, considering how bad I've been about consistent schedules on this show, I think says a lot, and it's all about you guys. So thank you guys. Seth, Joe, final thoughts.
Go ahead.
We'll start with Seth.
Yeah.
I was going to say it. Yeah, I mean, like at the end of the day, Matt has a good point. You could just default to FIFO for everything, and you don't have to report much. But if you want the most flexibility going forward, in the example of HIFO, to pay as little tax as possible, going with specific ID is probably going to be your best course of action. You have until the first time you transact with Bitcoin next year, or if you don't, when you file your 2025 tax return for that.
But why do you even need specific ID if you just do HIFO?
I mean, that's a good point. Yeah.
Yeah, but you're kind of just, you have two choices, specific ID or global. So you're just telling the IRS. I mean, you're doing HIFO on the back end, but you're telling them, hey, I'm doing specific ID, and this is what I'm declaring.
Right.
So you just have to declare one of the two. Doing HIFO, how you're describing it would be.
But if you do HIFO global, isn't it the same as HIFO specific ID?
The global is a little tricky to me. The global is like you're picking based off of a certain data point. So you could pick date, or you could pick cost basis. So like all of my 50K Bitcoin purchases goes to this address.
Yeah. The other nuance there is like it'd be HIFO by wallet. And so if you have 3 wallets, 3 different HIFO in each one versus specific ID, where you're just pulling from that individual wallet. But it's probably a nuance there where you're going to end up in the same place.
Okay.
I
think we're all just going to be paying FIFO.
I mean,
it seems like we got one day left here.
I hate it just as much as you guys hate it.
Yeah. Okay, awesome. Final thoughts, Joe.
No, I mean, thanks for having us on. It's the most exciting topic to talk about. Despite our profession, we don't necessarily love this stuff, but hopefully we're able to get some information out there for people. So yeah, obviously, other questions come up, they're welcome to reach out to us. Not a ton of time left to dive into it for each individual, but we'll continue to tackle this into 2025.
I think there'll be a few people that sleep better tonight, knowing that it's not.
Yeah, it's not an emergency. It's not the end of the world.
Because everything I was reading this morning, people were like
freaking the fuck out.
I'm not sending a screenshot to the IRS.
It's like,
which is fair, but like
no one has to send a screenshot to the IRS.
Yeah, exactly.
And worst comes to worst, you're just ending up paying FIFO.
Yeah, it's not the end of the world. And just don't sell your Bitcoin. Just hold on to your Bitcoin.
That's more of a meme than reality. Okay, guys. Oh, one more thing. If people need a new accountant, how do they reach out to you guys? Do you guys have slots open? Are you taking new users or new clients?
We're filling up really quick.
Yeah, we are kind of full, but we're also looking to hire potentially. So your accountant, reach out to us.
If you're a prospective client.
And then if you're a client, we need to get those additional accountants, and then we'll be able to take care of you. But no,
if you're going to be a client, you have to bring them an accountant to work with them.
BYOA, bring your own accountant. No, you reach out to our website. We're looking to expand for 2025 and make sure that we can continue to support the Bitcoin.
You can email tax@SatoshiPacioli.com, and one of the two of us will answer it.
tax@SatoshiPacioli.com, or they could go to SatoshiPacioli.com for more information.
Yeah, exactly.
These guys literally said right before we went on, they're like, we're not even advertising our product because we have too many clients. They just did it out of the goodness of their heart because they knew everyone was panicking.
And
they wanted to help us.
Yeah, we had a whole bunch of clients that were like, we can't meet with you all individually. Yeah, we'll go talk to Matt. He'll have all the good questions, and then hopefully this applies to them. And if not, we'll follow up with it individually.
Honestly, I mean, I'm kind of pissed off that I had no idea HIFO existed until this conversation.
We should have had more tax conversations. Yeah, we could park. Fair
enough. I mean, you guys have never done my individual returns. You just do all my businesses, which I'm very grateful for. Thank you.
Yes.
It's awesome doing the return for RHR while you're listening to RHR.
It's a vibe, right?
Yeah, it's pretty neat.
Awesome. Freaks, I have it's a double header dispatch week. I have Buck Purley, who's head of open source at Unchained. We got a bunch of interesting things to talk about, including some kind of announcement that I don't know what the announcement is. So that's going to be Wednesday at 1900 UTC, which is 2 p.m. Eastern time. If you haven't gotten with the standard of UTC yet, so join us live for that, or just listen to your favorite podcast app. Huge shout out to Seth and Joe. Thank you guys for joining us.
Thank you for having us.
And stay humble and stack sets.